Hello, everybody. It's nice that I can see myself in the computer. It's fine. I think the title of this week's sit was something like, what is a modern monastery, or what is a monastic academy? Which is a question I've been thinking a lot about, even though I've been here for over 3 years. And I'm continually trying to explain to new people what this place is, because I'm not sure the word monastery really has relevance for a lot of people, a lot of personal history that they can connect to, or experiences they can connect to. And even more confusing is a modern monastery or a monastic academy, because it's clearly not a monastery, but what's the modern part mean, and why do you say monastic academy instead of monastery? So it's a constant question I'm asking myself, and so I wanted to use this Sunday to provide some perspectives on it. This isn't exactly the official view of the monastery, the monastic academy, the modern monastery. These are just my personal current iteration on it, and I'm drawing on some established other forms of organizations to do some cross-comparison and maybe make it more relevant and understandable. Recently I've been reading Suzuki Roshi's biography called Crooked Cucumber. It's Suzuki Roshi was one of the founders of Zen Buddhism in America. He was a Soto Zen priest who came over decades ago to the Bay Area and took over a temple there that was mainly catered towards Japanese Americans at the time. And it's interesting reading his biography that the administrator, the monk in charge in Japan, whose job was to find a replacement new teacher to send to San Francisco, was having a hard time. Many months asking different priests and monks, will you please go to San Francisco? They really need someone. They don't have anyone right now. There's just an assistant teacher there who's only working part-time. They really need someone. And no one wanted to go to San Francisco. None of the monks wanted to go. Why would we want to go to San Francisco in America? A, we just got out of war with them. B, there was a whole internment thing where they put the Japanese Americans in concentration camps. C, it's America. We're Japanese. I'd rather be in Japan. There's no prestige. There's no renown. Taking over this new temple that no one knows about. Apparently Suzuki Roshi was very interested in going abroad at a very early age, and tells a wonderful story. At one point, he was living with this English woman in Japan who was an English teacher. And so he would do errands and sort of help her out, and they have a lot of lively discussions. And she happened to have a Buddha statue in her house as sort of just a decoration that I think the Empress of China gave her or something. And she wasn't Buddhist though. She was just, she just liked it, and it was a gift, so she had it in the house. And so Suzuki Roshi at one point, and she kind of kept it with the shoes, which is really disrespectful. In Japan, you're not supposed to keep the Buddha statue with your shoes. And so he didn't want to have a conflict or anything. So each day he started offering water and food to the statue and bowing to it and offering incense. And she would kind of tease him, worshiping this idol, and why you sort of magical thinking kind of thing, or you're worshiping some creature, being, supernatural being or something. And this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. And he never fought back at her. He just said, well, I just want to do it or something. And so he just kept doing it each day. She kept teasing him every once in a while, but they just kept doing it. And apparently one rainy day, they're both stuck in the house, and she just broached the topic. Why do you keep bowing to the statue? Do you think he's going to bless you or something, or give you some sort of gift or something? And he'd been preparing for weeks or months, learning his English and trying to get the right Buddhist words into English. He knew this conversation would happen eventually. And so he was prepared. And so he explained the whole thing, that when I bow to the Buddha, I'm bowing to my own Buddha nature. It's a sign of humility. It's a sign of respect. It's a sign of recognizing that all living beings are Buddhas, and that taking that time to really acknowledge and realize that. And they had a very long discussion, and sure enough, she started following his example and got the shoes out of the way and started bowing and offering incense, and got more and more interested in the practice, and eventually joined him in meditation and everything. And he said that was a really pivotal moment for him. And that's when he thought, maybe I could go abroad and really teach other people this practice, because they don't seem to know anything about Buddhism or meditation, and it's possible. It's really possible to do this. And so, but decades went on. That was when he was really young. And decades later, he finally got the opportunity when he was in his 50s to go to San Francisco. And so he went, and it's interesting these days in Buddhism, we associate Buddhism with meditation. If you go to a Buddhist center, you must just meditate all the time or something. At the Monastic Academy, we meditate every day for hours. And once a week, well, once a month, we spend a week in silent meditation for the whole week. And so people just think meditation must be what all spiritual people, especially the Buddhists, do. But in fact, in Japan, a lot of temples, that's not what you do. And that's what Suzuki really cared about. He kind of got tired of just doing the minister role, of doing all these ceremonies and having to do all these services and funerals and all these things. His heart was really in practice and helping other people realize their Buddha nature. And he felt called to do that abroad. And so he came to America, came to San Francisco, had his little temple, mostly filled with Japanese Americans, but then he started offering sits, and bit by bit, people started joining, and today we have San Francisco Zen Center, Tassajara, and Green Gulch, vibrant centers of practice in that area that practice Soto Zen Buddhism. And I have a friend that's actually at Tassajara now, doing a long-term retreat. So Buddhism doesn't necessarily mean meditation. And one of the books that I read a few years back that I really loved was called Deliberately Developmental Organizations. It was a book written by these organizational psychologists that were really interested in certain organizations in the world that seemed dedicated towards the human flourishing, the human development of all of their employees. And in their view, you didn't have to sacrifice profit for your employees. For them, if you cultivated and you intentionally set up daily practices, daily culture that was geared towards helping everyone in the company develop, continually find their edge and work on their edge and grow beyond their edge, and then find their new edge, intentionally throw them in new roles they're not prepared for and are slightly above their skill capacity, that would be a good thing. And sure enough, the three companies they profile are widely successful in their respective business fields. And the way the authors put it is, most of us, when we go to work, do a second job most of the time that no one is paying you for, but we all feel like we have to do, which is we're trying to only present our best selves, always trying to hide all the mistakes we make, and trying to take as much credit as we can and try to hide all the problems and vulnerabilities and uncertainties and things that we don't know. And what a waste of human resources and human potential that is, that most of us are doing the second job of needing to protect ourselves, not able to bring our full selves into our work environments, really a lot of our lives. And indeed, I have a friend that wrote an article a while ago that talks about how, well, I'm going more broader here, that over the hundreds of years, we've gained greater and greater power, greater and greater capacity, greater and greater freedom in a lot of respects. And in the process, we've kind of lost a lot of unifying culture and community. A lot of things that used to be just taught in communities, such as ethics, for example, are sort of left to, if you're part of a church, then you're church, I guess, but a lot of people aren't actively involved in organized religion anymore. Maybe your university education, schooling, television, it's not really clear where you get this stuff. And so he says, for a lot of us, we sort of ad hoc create our own culture. We find the experts in whatever field we're interested in. We go to the CrossFit gym or the yoga studio or the Tai Chi place, and then we go to we read these books on paleo diet or veganism or fruitarians or something, and then we find other books that talk about how to work, and we create our own culture and we create our own identity based on all these different slices from different places. But what's lacking is a community where we can bring our full selves into it. A community where everyone's not just interested in this one topic, but we can bring everything, all the struggles, all the joys, everything that's happening in our life. That's what a true community is, where we can bring our full selves. We don't have to compartmentalize or, go into the reading book club and we only care about that topic, or we go to the gym and we only care about the physical fitness or something. So in these deliberately developmental organizations, they really care about developing the full character of the person, and that if we do this, not only will we be financially successful, but everyone will be happier, everyone will be will develop more. And that you can't really separate people's interior life from their external productivity, effectiveness, and all the costs that come with not addressing these gaps create a lot of problems in the workplace and ultimately create a lot of loss. And the book goes into a lot more details, but different practices, and each organization is very different, unique in how they address this. But they're all unified in this stance that they want to work with all of their employees to develop their capacities. They intentionally give them learning opportunities on a regular basis with feedback, and intentionally want to promote and even maybe rotate responsibilities so that they never get too complacent in their role, and that everyone from the top bottom should be open to growing and getting feedback and learning. And I would make the case we do that at Maple. We give each other constant feedback. We rotate roles so that people are trained in multiple things, and as soon as you get complacent, something will happen where you're no longer complacent. Oftentimes it can be painful or a struggle, but ultimately very rewarding, and there's no choice but to bring your full self into the community, because you're just there. And the schedule makes it so you have to face yourself, you have to face each other. There's not really, by signing up, you're signing up to face the truth and to grow. That's the agreement we make when you sign up to be a resident. And I think it's great. I teach a practice called circling, which is an interpersonal meditation form. And a lot of times it can be awkward because we have these habitual ways of relating to each other where we want to present our best face that we've learned over the years of this is how I'm supposed to relate. This is the proper way to receive attention or communicate with people. and encircling, that kind of gets somewhat shattered. And you get to explore different ways of relating rather than your default habitual ways. Likewise, at the monastery, I often joke with people, well, it's not really a joke, but kind of a joke, that I kind of like it when people start kind of getting scared or angry or stressed. Not because I want anyone to be angry, stressed, or sad or anything. I want everyone to be happy that I live with. But I trust them more when they're willing to show that, when they've reached the point where that you can't hide the parts of you, the shadow parts of you that are struggling. And when you're able to share that in the community, share that in your practice, really come face to face with it and work with it skillfully, I trust that person more. I go, okay, this is a person that is okay under stress, under pressure. And even if they fall apart a little bit, they'll get back up and they'll find a way to keep going. That's huge for someone to actually face that, get through it, and then it's probably going to happen again. And for anyone that knows the residents for a long period of time, in my mind, that's a very common growth arc you see of people hitting some challenge level and growing out of it. And then hitting new challenge levels, new challenge levels, new challenge levels. And it's not always the most efficient way of doing things, but in the long run, it's the most effective, and it creates real leaders, real people of substance and trust that aren't going to shatter when things are really hard. Of course, the deliberately developmental organizations are still talking about businesses. One of them is a hedge fund. So it's questionable whether or not they have ethics, if they're even caring about that part. So another thing I mentioned in the email is metamodernism. Metamodernism, on one hand, is sort of like an art movement. You could say it's a philosophy, or it's a political movement. It's still growing and very new, where they're focused on the idea that each of our subjective experiences, each of our interior lives, our spiritual well-being, our emotional well-being, our social well-being, is intimately connected to all the social, economic, ecological challenges we face today. And it's really important that we create a society, create a culture where we address everyone's interior lives. Right now we have all this material wealth. We have all these fancy phones and nice laptops and ability to travel around the world and work remotely anywhere in the world and do all these fantastic things with great medicine and a lot of great things. And yet there seems to be a crisis in the interior life that's been happening for decades, but seems really, at least for me, really poignant these days, with the loneliness, the lack of meaning, the despair, the depression, suicide, sort of just lost sense, feeling disconnected, feeling like nothing matters because the world's going to end anyway and the sun's going to get extinguished one day. Sort of this valuing the objective world and things like having a nicer phone versus individual's happiness, individual meaning, has kind of created a really skewed version of what we care about, what we prioritize, what do we measure, what do we focus on. And it's hard for the monastery because a lot of times, sad to say, a real sticky point for a lot of people is the money. I don't know if I want to pay a few $1,000s to train at the monastery. You have to give up my career. This is going to be an empty spot on my resume. I know that's something I definitely thought about before I applied, was how is this going to impact my career? What about my financial feasibility? Those are the things that are ingrained by our culture to value. the financial aspect. And you don't even have a way to measure happiness or meaning or spiritual progress or any of that. It's such a cloudy, fuzzy arena. So these metamodernists talk about that matters. People's interior lives matter, and as long as we don't address that, the outward problems we have, the economics, the environment, everything, soil erosion, everything that's happening. Those are all just symptoms of an interior problem that are interconnected. And so ultimately, the monastery is a place where we train people to work on their interior lives, but also learn how do you take power and be effective in the world. That we're not just going to work on our inner lives, but really interconnect and interface with practically how do we operate in the world. Part of this is just pragmatic because we just need to. Residents have to learn how to do fundraising, have to know how to do bookkeeping, have to learn how to do this and that and the other because there's no one else to do that work. But more importantly, the residents learn all these skills that I might not necessarily, if I had to choose, want to learn. I don't like writing legal contracts or writing out budgets. If I had to choose, I would get a high-paying job being a programmer and I'd never have to look at any of that stuff. But that's not an option when you join a monastery. You're given the job of what's most needed by the community. And what I personally want isn't necessarily the most important thing. And so there's a joy when I can let that go. It's not about constantly trying to optimize myself, and I can just serve others and find there's a real joy, there's real fulfillment. There's no more needing to constantly second guess or figure out things for me, and I can just do what's needed right now. It turns out that's a lot more fun, it's a lot more fulfilling, and ultimately is what's needed. Is not a bunch of individuals that are more and more empowered, more and more stronger, and more capable. What you need is a community, or communities of people working together that have these godlike powers, that are able to wield and be stewards of great amount of power, but also come from a place of great wisdom and great love. That we can get past these games of rivalry, these prisoners' dilemmas, and these roles of conflict where we're actually collaborating and we're creating anti-rivalry games. How do we create situations where it's not me versus you, but it's where everyone wins, and that's what I care about. The way we do that, practically speaking, is in a lot of ways. Primarily at our place, it's through the mindfulness practice of learning how do we focus our attention in a relaxed, sustained way so that the patterns, the habits that have been instilled and ingrained in us from many different sources don't run our lives. And so we use meditation, mindfulness practice to break through those, to learn those, to get familiar with them, and find new ways, new freedom to act in more skillful, more loving, more clear, more wise, more powerful ways. So, our good friend Jōshin from California will be doing the guided meditation and helping us practice this in a very concrete way.
Thanks for coming tonight. So we'll spend about an hour in practice, and we'll have a little break in the middle for movement. So throughout this period, feel free to practice in any way that works for you, whether that's sitting, standing, walking around, lying down, any other posture you want. And so from wherever you are, go ahead and attend to your posture. We'll begin this practice period by stabilizing, extending, relaxing our posture. Start by stabilizing the lower part of your body, your feet against the ground, sit bones against the chair, part of you that's in contact with the ground. Move your body in a way that stabilizes that more. And experiment with making small adjustments, a couple millimeters this way or that. Try things out, see what direction is more stable. And having done that, root your sacrum into this stable base. Take the tailbone, the lower part of the spine, and tuck it under slightly, connecting the spine to the legs, to the ground. Allow the front of your body, your solar plexus, your chest, to extend forward in space and upwards. Let the back of the head reach up towards the ceiling, towards the sky, so that the top of your spine is straightened and elevated. And center your body so that your body is in the middle of your center of mass. So that you're not leaning one way or another, backwards or forwards. So that the muscles holding up your spine can relax. Now going again from bottom to top. In the lower part of the body, breathe in a way that's relaxed, that relaxes your body. Experiment with different ways of breathing. See if you can find a way of breathing that brings more relaxation into your body. As you experiment, you might find certain ways of breathing don't work for this. They cause you to tighten up more, get more anxious. That's okay. You can treat that as data, as information. If I breathe in this way, then my body gets more tight or more anxious. And try breathing in a different way. And spend the entire sitting period just experimenting with bringing relaxation into the breath, and having nothing seem to work. And this is a good use of time. You learn a lot about what doesn't work that way. You can get creative. Try breathing with different parts of your body. Breathing from, breathing into different parts of the body. You can try following the breath, letting it go on its own. You can try actively managing it, or anything else you come up with. Now experiment with bringing more energy into the breath without losing that relaxation. See if it's possible to breathe in an energized, active way. Experiment with different ways of doing this. And moving into the center of the body, the core, see if it's possible to breathe from and with the muscles of the abdomen, the core. Not with the throat or the head. Actually engaging the muscles in the abdomen, the lower body, and using them. To exhale. You reach the bottom of the exhale, you can just relax the muscles and let the inhale come naturally. And again, we're trying different things, experimenting. It's okay if we don't succeed. We're just giving it our best shot right now. moving up into the chest, see if it's possible to have a breath that's playful, pliant, spry, adapting to the circumstances. Coming once again to the top of the spine. Let the breath flow through your whole body. See if it's possible to feel each breath through each part of your body. On top of the head, the soles of the feet, the center of the body to the surface of the skin. Breathe with and to your whole body. Now, starting once more from the lowest part of the body, stabilize the posture again. Move your body around again. And simultaneously, check if the breath is relaxed. In the sacrum, root into the low body, and check if the breath is energized. The core, center your body, and check if the breath is coming from and with the muscles of your core. And the solar plexus, open it, and check if the breath is playful. Top of the spine, elevate it, bring it up towards the sky, and check if the breath is going through the whole body. Feel like you can try exhaling completely from the beginning to the end of the breath, letting out all of the air in the lungs. and then letting the in-breath come on its own. In a way that's relaxed and energized and from the center, playful and through the whole body. Now, continuing with that breathing, turn your attention towards subjective experience, the mind, the world of thoughts and emotions. Starting now at the top of the spine, notice if there's any sense of covetousness or desire for material things, things of the world. Like coffee, a donut, a laptop, phone, smiling faces of people. Anything like that. And also any covetousness for any sort of experience. In particular, any sort of experience of enlightenment or spiritual transcendence. And work with that experience. If it's present, notice what that's like. If it's absent, notice what that's like. And see if it's possible to, just for now, let go of it. Notice if there's any sense of relief in that. Coming into the chest, notice if there's any sense of hatred or ill will. Any sense that any other living being should suffer or shouldn't exist. And see if it's possible to let go of that, set that aside, purify it, cut through it, get rid of it, again, just for now. Not in any sort of permanent sense. You're not trying to never again experience ill will, but simply in this moment, set it aside. Does the belly, notice if there's any sense of anxiety, worry, rushing, sense that I shouldn't have done that or should have done that. Might do this, might not do that. Sort of frenetic, anxious, worrying pattern. And again, see if it's possible to set that aside for now. One way you can set it aside is by attending to the breath. Coming into the sacrum, notice if there's any sense of torpor, tiredness, slothfulness, drowsiness, falling asleep. And again, just for now, practice setting that aside. Again, practice doing that with the breath. Coming into the lower part of the body, the base. Notice if there is any sense of shallow doubt. A sense of doubt about things that you are actually clear about, that you actually know the answer to. And again, just for now, practice setting that aside. And now simply attend to the breath. And follow the breath in the belly, tip of the nose, throughout the whole body. And for the next few minutes, as we begin to move around, walk around, you can keep following the breath and In about 4 minutes, I'll ring the bell and we can regather in this room, find our seats again. So continue practice, continue to follow the breath, and if you like, you can get up and practice in motion now. last half hour or so preparing to meditate. But you thought I forgot the bell. We're now going to meditate. So, using that preparation, preparing the body and mind by aligning the posture and the breathing, purifying the hindrances. We're now going to bring our attention to a technique of some sort. This can be any technique you've been working with, any technique you'd like to work with for now. And if you don't have a technique, then I recommend focusing on the breath and exhaling completely from the beginning to the end, and then letting the inhale come naturally. Sort of demonstrate it with a sound for the exhale. So you can practice in that way if you like, or again, work with any other technique. And really go for it. Just for the next 25 minutes or so, try to not do anything but the technique. And set everything else aside. Just for a few minutes, 25 minutes. You can come back to your normal mind right after I ring the bell. Just for now, see if it's possible to give everything you've got to that technique. And for now, if there are any thoughts about the practice, thoughts about the technique, simply let those happen in the background. And keep your awareness, your attention on the technique as much as possible. Have you noticed that your mind's been wandering, you've been thinking about something else for, say, 10 or more seconds? No need to make a big deal of it. Simply start again by moving through the posture and the breathing, and then through the hindrances once again, and then coming right back to the technique. And have fun with it. If it's possible to make it into a game. How quickly can I bring my attention back to the breath and place it on the breath? Quickly can I notice that I'm distracted? How fully can I tend to the breath in this moment? Don't know how to do this. And that's okay. Try things, play around, experiment. Yeah, so in my experience, yes, actually. This is one of those things that was actually kind of surprising to me. People talk about like being able to build chi, like use chi to radiate heat. Like that's something that I kind of was like, what does that mean? But actually it's like pretty simple. Like if you're using the muscles of your core to breathe like fully, like vigorously, that's actually flexing, contracting them, and that's producing heat. Like that's actually going to raise the temperature of your body. So if you're really throwing yourself into the practice in that way, then you might be experiencing that. And I've noticed that if I'm really going for it, then I'll often break a sweat during a sit period. But that's one way that I've found that to be true in my own practice. And I don't know if there's more to it than that. Of course, there's also, with each in-breath, you can feel cool throughout your body. You notice like small fluctuations in that way. I don't know if that's quite what you were looking for.
It's just something I noticed and was curious about. Thank you.
Who's answering questions?
Paul first.
I find that often when I'm doing techniques that cultivate energy, I'll run up against emotional energy blockages, and when I'm able to push through that edge, then often a lot of crying comes up. And when I try to fully go into it, the experience is sort of like, I feel like if I was able to fully go into the eye of the hurricane, then there would be a peace. But before I get there, I get to like this stage where I'm being buffeted around by it. And I haven't been able to find a way to move beyond that, and it could just be that it takes getting to that edge over and over again, and every time I do, the edge moves. So it might just be a matter of practice and patience, but I'm also curious if you have any other ideas of how to work with that.
So it's, you bring a lot of energy into the practice, and then emotional blockages come up. And it seems like, so you have the experience of like, if you push through them, then there's a lot of crying.
Yeah.
And is the question like, how to go beyond that? Or
Yeah.
It's like how to go beyond the crying, sort of thing.
I mean, how to go beyond it, or how to like go fully into it, which I imagine is the same thing, ultimately.
The only answer that's coming to my mind is to keep going, keep trying things. Like there's nothing that I can think of that's like, I've had that experience and I did this and it worked.
Yeah.
So, you know.
I have a question about something you said, Peter. You were talking about the circling, and when you appreciate that people come with their, on the spectrum of human emotion, and they come with either sadness or disappointment or upset, not that you're happy about that, but that it, can't remember what you said, it makes you more, feel more connected, or that they're did you?
I just trust. I don't remember the word I used, but trust sounds about right.
Okay.
I feel like I'm seeing more of them
Right.
than they normally probably show.
And okay, that, and you said it's not always the most efficient, and but it is the most effective.
Yeah, well that's so that'd be for the deliberately developmental orgs or at the Monastic Academy. For a long time, we still do it, but less often. We would rotate the roles of the residents every 2 months. So the head cook would become a new person every 2 months. The drummer, the chant leader, the disciplinarian, the care person, all the roles would change every 2 months. That's not necessarily the most efficient way to run an organization if everyone's changing their job every 2 months. There's a lot of training, there's a lot of handing off. And just as soon as someone's finally really competent and good at their job, we're giving them another job to be competent. But in the long term, it's more effective because they become more well-rounded. They understand all of the responsibilities, so they're more able in their role to take care of the other roles within their role. And ultimately, it creates leaders so that once you've done several roles, you have a more holistic picture of the organization, more capable of leading, seeing things from everyone's perspective. And the way that one of the authors of the book talks about it, and it's a kind of common thing in productivity circles and exercise and stuff, is like there's my memory's kind of shot today, but I think there's like first order, maybe someone here knows this, first order consequences and second order consequences. Example they use is if you go exercise, first order consequences you feel weak and tired and kind of crappy sometimes. And you go, why should I exercise? You just feel terrible, that's the first order consequence. But in the long term, I'm actually more healthy, I'm actually stronger, I'm actually more fit. But that's a second order consequence that is not obvious immediately, especially this first time exercising. Similar with mindfulness practice. First time people meditate, they go, why am I doing this? This is terrible, I'm so distracted. It's boring. Some people like catch on really quickly, you know? Those are lucky people. For a lot of us, it's this is terrible. It's like watching paint dry or something. But the second order consequence is actually a more concentrated mind, a more stable, relaxed mind, more openness, more able to meet challenging, stressful conditions. So it might not be short-term efficient to be trying to practice mindfulness rather than doing something productive, as people say. But it's more effective in the long term.
So what's the consequence when people get really good at what they do and they don't change their job, or they don't have the opportunity to have that cycle?
Well, so this is a subtle question. So my first instinct would be, I'm not advocating that everyone should always switch their job every 2 months, or 2 years or something. But there's a certain more likely guarantee that a person absolutely will learn something for changing the role. And one thing at a place of training like ours is that we do that. And we're not trying to be the most efficient organization on a day-to-day scale. So we're willing to invest in each person to definitely get that training. So there's a definite, you're definitely going to learn something if you're switching between all these roles. But you can still do that, I think, within one single profession. It's not like you have to switch jobs. It's just more of a guarantee that you're going to learn something if you're switching jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And practically speaking, really practically speaking, because people think of monasteries in our place, it's a sort of magical place that's run on magical formulas or something. On a very practical level, it's really bad if one person has all the knowledge of bookkeeping, another person has all the knowledge of cooking, and another person has all the knowledge of whatever it is, how to run a website. That person leaves, and then suddenly no one knows how to do these things. That's really inefficient and ineffective.
Yeah, yeah. And then quickly, my other question was, as you said something about the truth, that it seeks the truth. That's part of the job of, or what a monastic academy does, the monastery, like seeking the truth. And my first thought was, with all the social constructions that there are, like, is there a belief that there is one truth? There you go.
Huh. Opinions will differ. Not sure what the value of any opinion is. But,
Curious about yours.
Hmm. I don't remember the context of what I said, but what's coming to me now. What's coming to me now is that there are ways, there are different ways of perceiving my experience, and a lot of times, like Autumn mentioned, there can be blockages in my experience, and those blockages color how I see the world. Rose-colored glasses, as they say. So these could be pain-colored glasses, trauma-colored glasses, or whatever colored glasses. So mindfulness is one way to work through those certain blockages. Now the question is, can you ever be free of any glasses? I know for sure it's definitely possible to put down some. And according to some books and some teachings, you can put down seeing altogether. Other people would say that you can have the realization that how you see informs and affects and ultimately produces what you see. And so one realization is just realizing there are different ways of seeing. Each of those different ways of seeing creates a different perception. And truth is something, in that case, like how I see determines what I see. That's one spiritual school. And then there are other spiritual schools that say you can reach the end of seeing, which would be the end of self. And I don't know if you necessarily come to, it's not like then you see the world necessarily, I don't think. You're not seeing it through the lens of self anymore. That glasses is put down. And that's very powerful, I think, because normally we're always viewing through those glasses. I'm not personally saying I've done that, but that's what's coming to me now.
Thank you. That's good food for thought.
Yeah, so it's a question for Jōshin. Sort of a practical question. When you mentioned just putting aside tiredness and sloth, this was the people who are laughing are aware that I'm just very tired right now. And so I don't know, I thought this might be a good idea. And in fact, it worked for a few seconds. And then I sort of gradually became quite tired again, which I guess in some sense is unsurprising. I'm curious if that, like, if there's something beyond, like, stopping being tired for a few seconds, if, like, you can, in fact, just, like, put away tiredness and just, like, be fully present for half an hour and then sleep or something?
My experience is yes, definitely. Turns out you can.
Okay.
Well, so one way that this has happened for me is that I've been really exhausted, in the kind of exhaustion where it's like clear that it's not so much about not getting enough sleep, and it's more about like something in me doesn't want to practice or something. And I've had it happen before on retreat that I'll be like falling asleep, like sitting down, and then I'll stand up, and then I'll still be falling asleep standing up. Like I'll start to fall over and catch myself. Like really, really, really like set on tiredness as like basically the strategy for what's happening. And then I'll go for, on a retreat we'll have a guided meditation period once a day with Soryu. So I'll go out for the guided meditation, still really tired, like still falling asleep, still nodding off. And then like he'll say during the guidance, like set aside exhaustion. And from that point on I won't be exhausted. Like I'll just be focused and practicing. I don't know how that works. I've accessed some of it for myself. Like I have a limited ability to, there are a lot of different strategies you can try for it. Like you can try breathing really vigorously, rapidly, or you can just try setting it aside, treating it as an experience, setting it aside, and keep doing that. But there's something strange that happens when like you're practicing with someone who's practiced for a very long time. I don't know what it is. They tell you to do something and you do it.
Thank you.
The coolest part of what you said is that it actually happened for a few moments.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me. What's up with that?
I wish I had more.
Blake, did you have a question?
I have exactly that question.
I just wanted to hear you say it.
And I tried setting it aside and it didn't set aside even a moment.
Yeah, same.
Oftentimes this can actually, like practical stuff is allowed too. So one way to set it aside would be to stand up. Or to, I don't know, hyperventilate or something. Actually all practical stuff is like, allowed.
Let's go over to
I kind of have a comment about the question that came up about emotion, and just that's something that sometimes gets sort of in the way of my meditation as well. And so something that's been kind of helping me with that lately is a practice of like, because usually when you're meditating, I've always heard like, breathe in that which restores and breathe out that which you don't want, right? So it's this idea of take in the good and breathe out the bad. But so it's sort of a switch of that and realizing like, so I have this feeling, and even though my situation may be different than everyone else's, that feeling has been felt a billion times, right? It's being felt by others. And so I can actually breathe in that feeling. And so it's kind of it feels very different and almost dangerous sometimes, but it's also pretty effective. So you like breathe in that feeling more deeply, try to feel it more, and then, what I've been doing, part of the practice I've learned of is to breathe out what you think the others who feel that feeling need. And that can be like a really simple thought. Like they need peace or love or whatever, but it could also be like breathing in a color and breathing out a different color, just sort of play around with what feels effective. So I don't know if you have any comments on that sort of idea.
So two things I really like. One is that it's not just yours, and that you're allowing it in. I mean, those are both really good points. I know for me at least, sometimes I'm meditating and I'm like, isn't this meditation supposed to get rid of this bad thing? When is it going to get rid of this bad thing? And it's not until I just finally accept and go. Even if I have this pain for the next 100 years, I'm going to allow that to happen. I'm just going to experience it fully, even if it's never going away. I'm going to get rid of that subtle hidden intention of, I'm going to do this technique and then this thing's going to go away. I'm just going to go, you know what, maybe it's just part of who I am. And the great thing is we used to have a former resident, Anna King, who had a bike accident and a traumatic brain injury. Some of you know her. And she didn't have the option of, I'm going to do this technique and my traumatic brain injury is going to go away. She has to live with that and learn how to relate to that. And she did. And it was amazing when she did guidances, as some of the people might remember, that they were some of the most powerful guidances. Partly because you knew she embodied it. There's no way you can fake what she was saying. And despite the pain, despite the challenges, she had strong mindfulness practice. And part of that was just no way out. There's not going to be, I'm going to go to sleep and then tomorrow's going to be easier to practice or something. So this is just hard for her. She learned how to do it. That was really inspiring. She's one of the first people I met when I joined the academy. Second thing you said was like, it's not just yours. And realizing that it's not even really mine necessarily. It's not just me or mine. As long as I'm attached to, this is my pain or this is who I am or whatever, that identification a lot of times, for me at least, makes it worse. And a lot of times the hardest part, it often gets hardest for me right before it breaks. Right before it's about to break is when it's the most turbulent and seems like this is not working at all. This is the point when I should quit and do something else. And oftentimes, in my view, the people that don't have a way out are the ones that often really progress because they don't have the option to stop going. There's a Zen master out in the West who works with addicts and prison inmates. A story he often talks about. Her name's Jōshin.
Chosen.
Jōshin?
Chosen.
Say it again?
Chosen.
Zen? Jōshin. Sorry, Jōshin. And the way story puts it is, when he was talking to her, she said, I love working with addicts because they've hit rock bottom. Even though society, you could blame society, you could blame your parents, you could blame all kinds of people. And it might be right. Society failed them, the parents might have failed them. But, you know, it's not going to do anything. They take full responsibility and they really practice. Because they've reached the point where they can't blame anyone else, they can't go somewhere else, they just have to be with themselves. And so ironically, so that lack of freedom and then taking on that full responsibility is actually really liberating and really freeing. Because they really face it. And I think Jōshin and I would probably share the sentiment, though you can contradict me if I'm incorrect in putting in this category. But the best thing with the cabin, not the best thing, one of the best things with the cabin is you don't have a way out. You sort of committed yourself when we did our solo cabin retreats that I mean, sometimes we could stop meditating, but for the most part, compared to regular life, we're really committed to, we've got to do something here. We got to break free of some stuff. Even though the first day I cried a lot, because I was like, what did I get myself into? Well, I just commit myself to. I might fail, this might be a terrible waste. But once I'm in that bind, now there's only one direction to go. Or get in my car and run away and never come back. I'm here.
2 or 3 days for me.
tried front picture, but yeah.
I stopped after day 3.
But thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we get some excellent points.
So when you went through the hindrances, I wasn't able to do the cutting through tiredness one, but I understood that one. But the other ones, I was like trying to reach for things, but not really, like there weren't things that matched in the present moment, and I wasn't really sure if I should like try to bring one up from memory or.
Oh, it's cool. Yeah, you can go through the list and like they're just not there at all. Like that's great.
Okay.
Just like, is there covetousness? No. Great. Is there ill will? No. Great. Is there worry? No. Great.
Okay.
Sloth? No. Great. No. Great. Sort of like, sorry, you've used the metaphor before. It's like you're going on a bike ride and you like check the chain. You know, look at the bike, make sure the bike is in good order. It's not going to fall apart. So then, usually you can just look at it. You know, okay, the bike's good. Go on the ride. Hopefully, it's a long ride. Sometimes you have to fix the chain, put some oil on or something.
I kind of felt like I rounded, but like I sort of knew that there was like covetousness there, or like tiredness. So are we looking for like tiredness in the spot where tiredness is? What I mean, like where you said it was?
No, anywhere. So, yeah, good clarification point. So I was teaching there the foral method. So the way that the foral method works is it uses the different points in the body as a mnemonic device. So the posture, of course, is actually just in that part of the body. It so happens that oftentimes having your attention low in your body helps with keeping a relaxed breath. Breathing from and into the sacrum helps with an energetic breath. But, you know, the main point is just like you set up those 5 points and then you can go through them without having to like keep track of a bunch of stuff. So you know, start low and just know that there is, like that point is the one where you're going to do like relaxed breath, stable base.
Okay. But we're not actually looking for those sensations in that place.
That's right.
Right, that's what I was doing.
Well, we should wrap up, so thank you all for coming out tonight and joining Jōshin and I.